Hello friends, I am OmnusI, and today I'm going to talk about current affairs rather than games long past as I usually do. Today we're going to talk about Wizards of the Coast. We're going to talk about the open gaming license and what it means for the role-playing game community. This is something that many people have begun to get excited and in some cases worried about. So we are going to discuss this, and I'm afraid it might be a little bit of a longer video, but it's a bit of a topic to cover. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, you probably don't play Dungeons & Dragons, or if you do, you just are a consumer. You play it. You don't worry about all the other stuff. Dungeons & Dragons, as it now stands in its 5th edition, is a robust product that allows you to do lots of things in gaming. And they just keep coming out with more and more stuff, so that's all well and good. Plus, there's all kinds of supplemental material out there from DM's Guild and plenty of other publishers. Now, what you may not know is, all of the things that Wizards of the Coast does not publish, that is for Dungeons & Dragons, is provided by a few different licenses. We're going to be discussing the legalese a little bit, so bear with me. First of all, people who publish on DM's Guild are fully endorsed by Wizards of the Coast. Of course they are, because half of the profits they make on sales go right back to Wizards of the Coast, and anything that they publish belongs to Wizards of the Coast. It's not truly predatory because they have a platform that is dedicated to Dungeons & Dragons and has hundreds of thousands of views on it, so you've got a wide audience choosing to possibly buy your product. And half of a decent amount is better than all of very little. That's certainly the hope. But that is an important distinction. Whatever is put on DM's Guild belongs to Wizards of the Coast, so that will become important. The other thing, and the point of contention here, is the open gaming license. It is the boilerplate legalese that allows other publishers, other contributors to make materials for Dungeons & Dragons. This was the genius piece that allowed Dungeons & Dragons to make such a comeback in the 3rd edition. All of a sudden, it wasn't just Wizards of the Coast producing product, but everybody could. This was a departure from the days of TSR, when there were certainly lawyers on hand if Wizards thought somebody was going and pilfering their intellectual property, even in some cases suing to try to prevent other people from using their system, which you can't do. But this is a breakthrough which allowed basically the entire movement of the old school Renaissance, or old school revival, whatever you prefer. But it also allowed Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons & Dragons to completely dominate the game space so thoroughly. With so many publishers going after the audience that was right there for them, well, the shelves were quickly filling with all these products, not just from Wizards of the Coast, but by these other companies like Troll Lords and Green Ronin, and it goes on and on, really. However, two-sided sword. So while all this stuff came out, when Wizards of the Coast decided, all right, we've done all we can with 3rd edition, we're going to make a new edition. More income coming in with new core books to buy, and we can fix all those little things that we didn't like before. And for 4th edition, we're going to try to widen the net and attract a new audience to come in. Younger folk who like things like massively multiplayer online role-playing games. These are people that we could reach, and we can possibly tap this audience and get them excited about a game with simple ideas that they can comprehend. Attacks that work on a cooldown, everybody having something to do with their core abilities, and so on. Well, we know how that worked out. 4th edition didn't last all that terribly long, although they did produce a large amount of material for it. It was not supported by third party nearly as much as the 3rd edition was, and the OGL that was still in existence enabled the creation of Paizo for Pathfinder. That's right. Pathfinder actually beat Wizards of the Coast 4th edition in sales, so as a result, they basically created their greatest rival at the time. And just like everything else, and you're going to have to forgive me because these digest-sized versions are minute in the scale and scope of their writing, but it also has the boilerplate for the Open Gaming License. Everything does. Everything OSR related has that in there. And honestly, Hasbro can afford really good lawyers. Hasbro owns Wizards of the Coast, therefore they will protect their property. If you try publishing something out there that is under the OGL, but you don't put the boilerplate in, that is required by the legalese in it. So, yes, everything has it, including products from third-party developers like GUI Cube. There's a section, the OGL, and that means everybody who has one of these has access to the OGL 1.0 and can read through what it means. You haven't done that? Not surprising. It really doesn't have anything to do with consumers. It's all about what the rights of the people publishing that material have. But it is significant to this conversation, which we'll discuss in a moment. Now, Wizards and Hasbro, of course, have learned lessons. They've learned that they can be toppled if public opinion sways too far. They changed out of 4th edition to a much more hat-in-hand, we want to make a game with you. They had an extensive playtesting, the D&D Next for 5th edition. We took your input. We made the game you want to play. And we listened to the community. All this stuff is because you wanted it that way, and it's a better product as a result. Absolutely. It wasn't entirely a PR stunt. 5th edition did borrow things that people liked from all the different other editions, and it became a smash hit, eventually eclipsing once more Pathfinder. And that was certainly a major renaissance in the gaming industry, where 5th edition came out. They teamed up with celebrity collaborators. They teamed up with influential, well, influencers. Critical Role and Chris Perkins, who works for Wizards of the Coast, doing the Acquisitions Incorporated stuff with the people from Penny Arcade. It just, the outreach went and went and went. Joe Manganiello, for instance, another one. And by getting this all under the tent of Wizards of the Coast's D&D, with Hasbro standing by smiling at their property and their profits raising, they attracted and built the biggest community ever playing role-playing games at one time, destigmatizing a lot of the role-playing and making it more mainstream. Of course, this was still met by the wagging of heads and the tisk-tisking and so on and so forth, but considering the massive amount of people who wanted to come in and play Dungeons & Dragons, it worked out pretty well for them, as it turns out. But there's a couple of things that really are a constant in Dungeons & Dragons over the history. Change. Wizards of the Coast wants Hasbro to be happy. As a matter of fact, a lot of the people who are in Wizards of the Coast now were put there by Hasbro. It's not just the game designers who had a love for the game. There's a lot of people making sure that it stays profitable too. So you've got quality control, yes, but you also have public media relations and people to make sure that disasters in public relations don't occur and don't hurt the bottom line and don't hurt the product. You have a lot of controls to make sure that D&D ends up being what they want it to be, something that lots of people can rally around, lots of people can buy to increase the profits. So, it shouldn't surprise anybody that with the changing world around us, eventually Wizards of the Coast was going to want to kind of trim off some of the fat and make sure that they cover their bases. A lot of people thought this was going to mean they were going to strike at the heart of the OGL and, stifle their competition or things like that. So there's been a lot of panic about things like that. I mean, if you don't have an open gaming license, you can't do anything for D&D anymore without lawyers being involved. Always having to worry that if Wizards of the Coast wants to squelch you, the moment you put in something inherently relying in more than just the system, there's going to be a team of lawyers who are going to throw you a cease and desist order and cut off your income and so on. So there's been some concern. Now, Wizards of the Coast, of course, and again, anytime I say Wizards of the Coast, I mean Hasbro as well, they realize that public opinion is starting to swing. And they've been very reactive when they think that public opinion is moving against them. Case in point, the race of the WotC of Spelljammer. Spelljammer's ink was barely cooling and drying by the time the Outrage engine showed up that, oh my gosh, the WotC are a race of former slaves who were uplifted by some mad wizard, and they were going to use them as a slave army. And Wizards of the Coast shut that down. Boom! Now, if you go and you buy a digital copy, all that stuff is taken out, leaving not much. The WotC are a pretty boring race right now because they have no vector. They didn't come from anywhere, they didn't go anywhere, they're just happy-go-lucky flighty monkeys. So, yes, Wizards of the Coast is very much watching that. So, as a result, they published this article about how the OGL may be changing to reassure everybody. This has been covered by a few other people, but I thought I would do it and translate the corporate speak a little bit and not have the rose-colored glasses. These are not rose-colored, so we're good. And just try to be as objectively fair as possible to both sides. I don't hate Wizards of the Coast. I understand what they do, and I know that there's some people who are there who are very passionate about Dungeons & Dragons and want to see it be as good as possible. I also am aware that they are a company and their stated goal is to make money. So I work for a company that's stated goal is to make money. I can appreciate that, and I've got years and years and years of corporate speak that I can translate this pretty well, plus a little bit of legal background. So we will cover this. I know some sites really, get, all, they can show you all the stuff on screen, but, I know you want to hear my voice more, don't you? Yes. So, this is a release they put out regarding their OGL 1.1. Now, the original OGL was from 2000. It hasn't changed in 22 years. They see fit to do it now, and it comes in the wake of leaked documents saying Wizards wants to make more money from Dungeons and Dragons and its properties for Hasbro. The Hasbro overlords are like, we think we can make more money off of this. So that's what they do. So in the wake of all this, I'm just going to cover this really quickly. So. We love the interest and passion the community has for D&D. We love D&D too. That means, don't hate us. So, when we see the D&D community concerned by rumors and misunderstanding, we want to clear the air and share the facts with you, even if it's a bit earlier than our original plan. You mad? We want you to be less mad, so we're going to come out and kind of tell you not to be so mad. You all matter to us, and we want to provide transparency on how D&D will continue supporting third-party creators. You have money we want, and we don't want you to be mad at us so that you continue to spend your money. And we want you to feel good about yourselves. So here are the facts. This becomes the important thing. 1. Will 1 D&D include an SRD / be covered by an OGL? SRD is a standard rules document. It's basically outlines all the things that you can and can't say in Dungeons & Dragons in a packet. And the OGL, Open Gaming License, is what allows you to publish under Dungeons & Dragons stuff without directly being beholden to Wizards of the Coast. So the answer to that is yes. First, we're designing 1D&D with 5th edition backwards compatibility, so all existing creator content that will be compatible with 5th edition will also be compatible with 1D&D. Great. So this isn't going to be a new edition then. It's going to be D&D 5.5. That's not a terrible thing. They could, just say that, but because, any edition, unless you're just basically clearing up the errata, you're making it prettier, involves some rules changes. So the new stuff that they're putting out is not drastically different. It's more choices, putting things in a different way, reorganizing a couple of things, but nothing earth-shattering that's going to stop you from using 5th edition stuff with the new 1D&D stuff, or D&D 5.5. So that's good that they're committing to that, certainly. That's going to, upset the community a bit less. And we've had D&D for, the 5th edition for almost 10 years now. That's the time that Wizards or in Dungeons and Dragons scope, that's about the time to start thinking about another edition. So, yeah. On the other hand, you don't want to, kill the golden goose and choke it off like 4th edition did to 3.5, so you can understand why they're straddling that. Second, we will update the SRD for 1D&D as we complete its development. Development that is informed by the results of playtests that we're conducting with hundreds of thousands of D&D players now. That's an important thing. As upset as people get over 1D&D and the revelations that come out about the directions that Wizards is thinking about making, it's still in playtest. None of this is final. It can all be changed. It can all be ripped out. If the community doesn't like something, they can change it. This lingers on with what they did with D&D Next. 1D&D, following the same track. Really, it's a proven success. So this makes a lot of sense. And with the SRD that they're going to change with the new content and decide what is exclusively ours that you can't touch and which stuff is stuff that you can work off of, that's actually to be expected. That's nothing that most people should be too concerned about. 2, will the OGL terms change? Yes. Panic time. We will release version 1.1 of the OGL in early 2023. That means this is all not official. Bear that in mind. That could be very important. The OGL needs to update to ensure that it keeps doing what it was intended to do. Allow the D&D community, independent creators, to build and play and grow the game we all love, without allowing things like the parties to mint D&D NFTs and large businesses to exploit our intellectual property. So somebody was making D&D NFTs? I doubt it. The lawyers would go all over that. But it does show that Wizards of the Coast is mindful of many of the things that are changing in the world around us. Technology, obviously they embraced when they bought D&D Beyond. But this speaks to other things, like their mention of NFTs, meaning the new technology as it comes out. That includes probably 3D printing. Haha, yes, you can make all kinds of things in 3D printing. You can make a dwarf, you can make an elf. Those aren't specifically D&D. But let's see you try to put out a Displacer Beast on Thingiverse. Let's see you put out a proper D&D Beholder. Now they can stop you from, putting stuff like that out and cutting into their profits with the actual official miniatures as produced by WizKids. This is something that they are preparing for because it's new territory. And as we go forward, they are covering their tracks. So that's something to bear in mind. Did anybody actually try to make D&D NFTs? Ugh, gross. So what's changing? First, we're making sure that OGL 1.1 is clear about what it covers and what it doesn't. OGL 1.1 makes clear that it only covers material created for use in or as tabletop role-playing games. And those materials are only ever permitted as printed media or static electronic files, like EPUBs and PDFs. Other types of content, live video, like videos and video games, are only possible through the Wizards of the Coast fan content policy. I'm not going to go over that at the moment, but it's basically it's guidelines as to what you can and can't use and put D&D's content in front of people. And one of these days maybe I will go over that, but honestly, things like videos like this one talking about Wizards of the Coast and D&D and stuff, as long as I don't do anything actionable, I'm fine. And that will continue to be the case for a lot of people. Or a custom agreement with us. Now that's going to be possibly quite significant, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too. To clarify, outside of printed media and static electronic files, the OGL doesn't cover it. Which means that you're not protected by the OGL. The OGL is a shield that you use to prevent you from being litigated by Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro's powerful lawyers. So if you're covered under the OGL, you toe the line, you follow all the rules, they're fine with what you put out. On the other hand, well, we're going to get into all the other stuff that's involved when you do follow the OGL. But everything outside of that, yeah, that's not just a gray area. That's something that could be very concerning. Will this affect the D&D content and services players use today? It shouldn't. The top VTT platforms already have custom agreements with Wizards to do what they do. So, Roll20, they already worked out with Wizards of the Coast because they put their content up, which, again, 1.1 is going to cover, even if the original Open Gaming License really didn't say this doesn't apply to virtual tabletops and stuff. 1.1 will definitely lock that down, which makes sense. Again, they're building and investing in that aspect. They don't want to short-circuit themselves. And D&D merchandise, like minis and novels, are never intended to be part of the OGL, and OGL 1.1 won't change that. So, there you go. Creators wishing to leverage D&D for those forms of expression will need, as they always have needed, custom agreements between us. So when Reaper makes a pretty passable rust monster and calls it an oxidation beast, I'm guessing that they had a conversation with Wizards of the Coast at some point. When somebody makes something called an eye tyrant that looks suspiciously like a beholder, that's probably when you're going to be talking to a Hasbro lawyer about that. Unless you pony up, go to them and say, can I make this? And see what they say. I have no idea how those conversations go. I've not been in that part of the industry. Second, we're updating the OGL to offer different terms to creators who choose to make free, share-alike content and creators who want to sell their products. What does this mean for you as a creator? If you're making share-alike content, very little is going to change from what you're already used to. If you're making commercial content, relatively little is going to change for most creators. For most of you who are selling custom content, here are the new things you'll need to do. 1, accept the license terms and let us know what you're offering for sale. So, yeah, you can't just slap an OGL sticker on it and say, we're good. No, Wizards of the Coast will track everything. So, that's the thing. And if you don't do this, you are in violation of 1.1. So, 2, and this one is, this one's pretty sticky. Yeah. It is. Report OGL-related revenue annually if you make more than $50,000 a year. What does that mean? That means that if you have a successful Kickstarter, if you have a YouTube channel that makes more than $50,000 a year, which I don't, but people do, you have to tell Wizards of the Coast what you're making. You can't hide it, and if you do, you're in violation of OGL. So, yeah, this is going to get interesting. And 3, include a creator product badge on your work. So you have to tell everybody, yes, we're towing the line. We are lockstep with Wizards of the Coast on this, which that's not that terrible of a deal. People have been putting the D20 game stuff on things for a while. That probably won't change a whole lot. But the fact that you have to be transparent with Wizards of the Coast about how much money you take in, that could be interesting. Could be pretty interesting. That will at least give the folks at Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro an idea about how much money is actually rolling in from Dungeons and Dragons, and then they can strategize after that. But we're not going to speculate here. This is just telling you how it is. And again, remember, none of this is completely official. This is just what they're saying to make us feel better about the situation. When we roll out OGL 1.1, we will also provide explanatory videos, frequently asked questions, and a web portal for registration to make navigating these requirements as easy and intuitive as possible. We also will have help available to creators to navigate the new process. We're willing to spend money on people helping you to toe the line because we know we're going to get money back from this. This is corporate speak. This is going to make us money, therefore we'll invest to make sure that you do it. But you don't have any excuses like I couldn't understand how to do it. No, we have people to help you with that. Don't worry, we're being very helpful here. So, For the fewer than 20 creators worldwide who make more than $750,000 in income for a year, we will add a royalty starting in 2024. So, I mean, that's pretty easy to understand. There are only so many people who are making a good deal of money. And is that net or gross? Because if that's, free and clear before you start paying expenses for staffing, for expenses in publishing and things like that, that's going to mean a lot of companies right now are going to suddenly get hit with a royalty. How big? We don't know. That'll also mean that people like, Matt Mercer is definitely making over $1 million a year with Critical Role. That means that he's going to be subject to the royalty tax, possibly unless he negotiates a deal that gets him around it. Who knows? But in this case, with the OGL, Wizards is going to have all the cards. So if you are going to be a publisher who thinks you're going to be making, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, this is another bill that might show up, courtesy of Wizards of the Coast, and they hope to generate revenue from this, clearly. Bottom line, the OGL is not going away. You will still be able to create new D&D content, publish it anywhere, and game with your friends and followers all the way in all ways that make this game and company so great. Great. Don't worry, everything's going to be fine. The thoughts of creators publishing across Kickstarter, DM's Guild, and more are critical parts of the D&D experience, and we will continue to support and encourage them to do that through 1D&D and beyond. So, what does that tell us again? Wizards wants you to be calm, everything's going to be okay, some things are going to change, but they're not going to affect 99.9% of you. The only people who are going to be affected are either people who are violating things because things have changed since 2000. There's a lot of different media out there, a lot of different outlets that people are using, and we just want to make sure that if you're using D&D stuff, we are in control of it, or at least we're overseeing it with our policies. Is this bad? Not really. It's being responsible in the one aspect, but it is also clearly preparing them to be making money whenever somebody else is making a lot of money. Wizards wants a cut. The other thing, too, is that this has gotten rid of some people's fears, and perhaps it should, that D&D is going to start requiring people to publish through DM's Guild, which, I said, is not a picnic. That would mean that companies like GUI Cube, who I have works published through, they can possibly take a bit of a breath at this, because until they reach the mark where they are, making over $750,000 a year, boy, wouldn't that be nice? That would mean that things shouldn't be that different. You'll have a creator badge to put on your product, okay. That will mean that, again, you have to tell them how much you're making. And Wizards could probably get that information anyhow. A lot of that stuff, because you file taxes, right, is probably something they could get a hold of. So probably not that critical for the smaller players. For the bigger players, yeah, it's going to be a little bit different. Also, for people who aren't making any money, Wizards doesn't care all that terribly much as long as you're not freely using their stuff and besmirching the company's good name. So, small-time YouTubers like myself, we're under the notice of Hasbro, unless we do something that goes viral and gives them a black eye. But for the most part, this is controlling your product. This is owning what you have, and it's what most responsible companies do who have valuable intellectual properties. So I'm not going to say that this is Wizard being evil, and I'm also not going to say that this is a completely open, it's a friendly document. No, it's meant to stop people from panicking, and it's meant to keep the PR going well for Wizards of the Coast. It has absolutely nothing in it that should guarantee or make anybody feel completely safe and secure who relies on open gaming license for a living. This should not stop you from being at least a bit concerned with what they can do. And I'm just going to tick off the major points of the OGL for you so that you can kind of understand what's going on, but I will point out the pertinent things. So it's broken up into 15 different paragraphs. as many legal documents go. The first one is the definition of all the terms and everything. That's good to know. It's basically the explanatory stuff that you have to declare in the beginning to give all this weight and value. 2, the license. The license applies to any open game content that contains a notice indicating the open game content may only be used under license. So that means this says that anything that uses this is going to identify and will be bound by the content. 3, offer an acceptance. By using the open gaming content, you are accepting it. There's no getting around it. If you're using OGL, you are bound by this license, which has been quite friendly. Again, remember, this is what really brought through 3rd edition to dominance over the market. So that's important. 4, grants and considerations. In consideration for agreeing to this, the contributors grant you a perpetual worldwide royalty-free, non-exclusive license. That will not be there anymore. Well, it will be there to a certain extent. They will now put terms on it. They will say they will give you a non-exclusive, royalty-free, up to $750,000 in profits, and beyond that we can assess a royalty, which they may spell out in the terms, and probably will be spelled out to some extent. So we'll be able to see that when 1.1 comes out. Representative of authors and contributors. If you are contributing original material, you represent that your contributions are your original. You can't plagiarize. That's basic. Notification of license copyright. You must update the copyright notice portion of the license to include the exact text of the copyright notice of any open gaming content. So basically, this is saying you have to defend your copyright for your stuff. Nobody else can, because you're lazy about looking at copyright. Somebody else can't run off and start using OGL stuff copyright free. So that makes sense. Use of product identity. You agree not to use any product identity, including an indication as to compatibility, except as expressly licensed in another independent agreement with the owner of each element. So again, if you're going to use stuff from a variety of things, you have to identify what is whose, and that's again important for lawyers. 8, identification. If you distribute open gaming content, you must clearly indicate which portions of our work that you are distributing as open gaming content. So if you have some stuff that is not open gaming content but is purely your own, you just need to note that. That's not a big deal. 9, updating the license. Wizards or its designated agents may publish updated versions of this license. You may use any authorized version of this license to copy, modify, and distribute any open gaming content originally distributed under any version of this license. So, that is the crux of it. They can change the license, and once they do, they've changed it. So, you cannot go back and publish under 1.0 when 1.1 rolls out. You can take all of your stuff under 1.0 and still treat it as 1.0 as law, and that's protected according to that. But it does say they can change it, and if you want, you can treat your new stuff, or you can treat the old stuff under 1.1 if you want, but you can keep it as 1.0 and be safe. If it violates anything after that, 1.1 will take effect. So there's no going back once 1.1 rolls out. It's just all the stuff that was under 1.0 is fine as 1.0 content, which means it's royalty free no matter how much you make. So if GUI Cube suddenly puts out The Darkest Dream and it sells like gangbusters because they put it out in, say, Portugal, and everybody in Portugal buys it, they're fine. The 1.0 still covers it because that's what it was produced under. But after the 1.1 comes out, you won't be able to claim the same protections because they have updated the license. Up to 10, copy the license. You have to put the boilerplate on, as I demonstrated Pathfinder did, GUI Cube does, and if you look through all of it, Pacesetters BX, Labyrinth Lords, the basic role-playing game, or basic fantasy role-playing, Osric, they all have the boilerplate. They have to. 11, use of contribution credits. You may not market or advertise the open gaming content using the name of any contributor unless you have written permission for them to do so, which is fun. Inability to comply, that's, you have to, if you don't comply, you have to fix it. Termination, the license will be terminated automatically if you fail to comply or you do not cure your failure. Like if you put out a batch of modules and you don't put the OGL in, you have to recall it because you're violating the OGL. Reformation, if any provisions of this license are held to be unenforceable, each provision shall be reformed only to the extent to make it enforceable. So they can't just change it how they want. That's protection. And then the copyright notice at the end is paragraph 15. So while most people just skip right by that, the important thing is that the license as it is, when you publish, you have to use the current license unless it was created under the old license. So there's protections. Will 1.1 have those same protections? Probably, just in a slightly different version and spelled out better for the technology of the time. What they do for virtual tabletops and distribution therein. What they're going to do with, multimedia rights. Movies, it's becoming a big thing. That was not covered before under the OGL or anything Wizards of the Coast had. If you wanted to use something from D&D and you wanted to make your own fan movie, if you made any money, you fell under the purview of Wizards of the Coast. If you implicitly cited their stuff. So Wizards of the Coast is kind of turning a little bit more into less of a feel-good, everybody's welcome at the table. They still look like that, but they're all, come on in, play. It'll cost you a little bit, but we'll give you access to the greatest hobby ever, from the greatest role-playing game ever. But there are things that they have to protect themselves. Legalese and these boilerplates and these rules exist to protect Wizards of the Coast and their bottom line. So, by understanding it that way, you kind of understand more of why some of the changes that have taken place throughout the years for Dungeons and Dragons have occurred. And looking back from where Wizards of the Coast started to where we are now, with them in a firm position at the top of the table, they will do the things that they need to do to make Hasbro happy and to make sure people are not taking advantage of the investments that they are making to try to grow out the brand. 1D&D is yet another example of Wizards of the Coast trying to make things, again, more flexible with what you can do, what you can't do, taking care of some of the edits that the designers have clearly considered from feedback or from their own musings. Things like making sure that all classes can change paths at 3rd level instead of 1st or 2nd, as some do, because people complained about it. A lot of people said, we don't like to pick at 1st level. We want to pick at 3rd level like these other races. And the folks behind Wizards' design team said, yeah, that makes sense. We want all the classes to be welcoming in the same way to everybody. So that's the direction that looks like 1D&D is exploring at the moment. In playtest, remember, this is all still being playtested. There will be changes. There's no doubt about that. Will they be huge? No, they can't. If it's going to be backwards compatible with 5th edition, you're still going to be able to play the game you enjoy playing the way you enjoy it. Are they pushing everybody to go to virtual tabletops? There may be some strong incentives. For instance, for paying the same amount for the digital version, you get a physical copy of the latest Dragonlance that comes out. Those kind of incentives are going to try to draw people into the digital space, where, yes, a lot of the speculation that comes out, Wizards could actually require you to pay to be on that service, whatever that rate might be. Absolutely. They could, like a video game designer, put out things like DLC so that you could have the perfect character model. It wouldn't surprise me if they tried to buy out Hero Forge and use that character creation thing. If they do, you heard it here first. but it would make a lot of sense for them to do something like that because so many people use that character creator of theirs. Wizards of the Coast would probably like a slice of that since so much of that is oriented towards their stuff. I feel actually fairly confident they're at least looking at that. And, you know, that is a service, and that is something that Wizards hopes to use to attract more money. I would not be surprised at this point to see little things like that. Will they affect the gamer, though? The average person out there who uses D&D's products? Very little. It'll make it a little bit more challenging in some cases for people who are not online to receive the instant changes and updates and probably some free bonus enticing material that Wizards may put out. But that's about it. You'll still have your games. They're still going to print them. Some people are saying they're going to all digital. It'll be quite a while before physical copy falls out of fashion and they stop making it. And once they do that, that's just going to open up the floodgates for other companies to exploit their absence, which, again, I don't see Wizards of the Coast abdicating that position anytime soon. It just doesn't make sense financially. And ultimately, when you look at it, it's the bottom line that dictates everything. If there's no money in it, or it's going to hurt your money, you don't do it. And that's what Wizards of the Coast will continue to pursue. They'll continue to make their books their way. Whether or not you like the 5th edition D&D style, it's going to change a little bit, but probably not in the direction you're hoping for if you like old school stuff. But the old school stuff is still going to be around. It will be an interesting time, I suspect. But again, the only thing that you can count on in the gaming space, and Dungeons & Dragons in particular, is change. So, don't panic at this point. Again, we don't know enough, and that didn't clarify nearly everything that people are going to want. Plus, it's not legally binding. If they change 1.1 beyond the scope of that, then they can do it. There's not much you can do. And as for me reading the 1.0 document, they can change it. And from then on, the only the old stuff is going to apply to is the stuff that was printed under the old version. So, I don't think D&D is going away. No, I don't think this is going to be a black mark on them. I think this will all blow over fairly quickly because outrage doesn't last very long. And there's nothing really in here to be outraged about unless you are somebody who's making a lot of money off of Dungeons & Dragons. In that case, you'll wait and see how metered your outrage has to be when you look at the first time you have to give them your money, how much you made, and they tell you that you're due a royalty fee to them. Yeah, we'll all find out together. But this is me dissecting them, and for those of you out there who care about the game industry and what's going on behind the scenes, maybe this is the first time you've heard about any of this stuff. Maybe this is the first time you've thought about the OGL. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Is fine. Otherwise, if you want to go and visit me on Facebook, I'm there as OmnusI, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. If you are absolutely outraged and nervous and are feeling a lot of anxiety about this, just remember, we've always danced to their tunes. It's just now they're showing what clause they might be able to pull out with a new clause. It's kind of a law joke. But at any rate, thank you for joining me. I am OmnusI, and it has been my pleasure to put this report out before you. So, as things change, I will keep my eye on it, but I felt that this really needed to be discussed. So, until next time, my friends, roll some dice, play some games, have some fun, and farewell.